Hi everyone. With this particular video, I noticed that today is Friday and they had two different Alien shorts available for the Alien 40th anniversary. So I already watched one of them, but I thought I might watch the other one and give my thoughts on it. The one that I watched was Alone, and this one I believe is Harvest. There are no cuts or pauses or anything like that. I'm just gonna sit down and watch this and react to it, sort of comment as I watch it. So without further ado, here we go.
This is an emergency distress broadcast from the November. Our ship is compromised.
The same kind of opening as the others.
All personnel in our emergency shuttle.
Close-up of the alien there, the effects look practical. It's a nice nebula as well. Watching Alien Alone, I thought the space effects didn't look quite as up to snuff. Here, they seem better. Like they had someone involved that knew how to work with digital effects. It's a pretty cool ship. Notice how it has sort of a dark design to it. It really reminds me of Dead Space. Or Alien Resurrection, very big and clunky, almost like a cinder block. Lots of flickering lights.
All personnel must evacuate to emergency
In Alien Alone, I thought the effects, or the set, they were trying to ape Ron Cobb, but didn't look quite right. And here, obviously they're still trying to imitate Ron Cobb. And I think the set perhaps looks a little bit more solid and sturdy. It's photographed a bit differently too. The pacing here is a bit it's a bit slower. You know, they have this long sort of slow take and just a slow panning shot while the actors move through the set, as opposed to these quick fading cuts. Yeah, I really like the lighting here is really good, just in terms of that type of disco lighting that they had in the original film. It's pretty solid. The actors are doing a pretty good job too, walking through the set. Nice. Mirroring the photography from the original, the same framing of the creature. Nice. That was pretty good. I think out of all the xenomorph kills that we've had so far, well, this is the first one out of all of the short films as far as I know. So she's pregnant with a human fetus, not an alien fetus.
Fuck, we're gonna get censored, eh? How we go?
I like how they don't just sit around waiting, like hiding in a locker, like in Alien Isolation. Like, she takes a risk because she's pregnant. So it kind of makes sense. It might, under normal circumstances, seem kind of dumb that she just runs around the corner after that guy's been killed, but she's pregnant. They don't have time to wait because the ship's on a collision course with the comet. I like this tunnel. You can see the prop bashing on the walls, where they took those cups and sort of glued them to the walls and painted them. Reminds me of a lot of the prop design in Alien, except that the prop design they used prop bashing for the props, whereas in this they've used it for the set. The set in the original film, I imagine they did some of that, but it also had kind of welded or steel-like quality to it. It's very industrial or engineered. So it's a different kind of look, but they're emulating that rom-com sort of aesthetic with a slightly different technique, I think, even though that technique was used in Alien. It's interesting. Good lighting here, too.
We end up back here.
We've been going in circles.
Reminds me of some of the portrait shots.
No.
In Alien and Aliens, like Ripley at the end of Aliens, when she faces off against a queen, there's a portrait shot just like that. I like that they had the aliens slowly dragging the guy away, as opposed to just pulling him into the darkness. It's a different kind of kill. A slower kind of alien, as opposed to in Aliens or something like that. Kind of reminds me of Aliens, where Hudson is pulled into the grate.
Collision imminent. All personnel not aboard emergency shuttles. Brace for impact.
Only two.
They have the reflection on the screen. It's an actual monitor. I like that. I'm not sure if it's done in post or not. Oh, darn. Now, that's maximum capacity, too. So does that mean...
Shuttle ejection sequence initiated.
Does that include the baby? Or just two human bodies?
Company probe will pick you up in 22 hours.
Until impact.
Music's good here.
Containment warning.
I noticed that they created their own images on the screens.
Foreign tissue detected. Launch override. Authorization granted. 17. 16.
Our first face hugging. An actual face hugging, not like an alien alone. Good slime effects on the egg. Interesting. We have our first android kill in the franchise, I think. Nice. That's a good sort of Samus Aran escape there at the end with the lifeboat or the escape pod. Good music too. And that too, by itself, sort of isolated as it fades into the starscape. All in all, this is pretty good. A couple of closing points that I enjoyed. We have an android being killed by the xenomorph from behind. It shoves its tail through her back and out of her stomach. I think I said during the short itself that was a first of sorts, and that's not true because in Aliens, Bishop was killed in a similar manner by the Queen, except in his case he was lifted off of the ground and then ripped in half. Here, she's just impaled. Reminds me of Amanda Ripley being killed in that manner in Alien Isolation. So that was a nice touch, I think. There's a good amount of milk, or whatever it is that she's spewing out of her mouth as she's being killed. The xenomorph effects were really solid, especially when that guy is killed at the start and you see the side shot of the alien's head and his head in the frame, and you can see the second jaw moving forward before it bites a hole in his head. That was pretty well done, all things considered. The quality of that was comparable to the alien effects in Alien Ore. And if I had to say which one looked better, I would probably have to go with this one just because it's practical and it's photographed, but the quality of the suit itself, there were very little, if any, digital touch-ups as far as I can tell. It was just a guy in a suit, just like an alien, and it was really well done. You could tell that a large amount of the budget went towards that. At the same time, there were enough space effects to make the outer space shots look good. Watching Alien alone, I thought there were very little, if any, space effects. And I felt as though they were going for that 1979 space look, just using like maybe a matte painting and some models floating through space. But they didn't quite nail the spaceship effects. In Alien or Star Wars, they used a particular type of photographing technique to make the ships look larger and to have them move through space in a particular way. And I felt as though that technique wasn't being used in Alien alone. And instead you had these models that were in the dark. They were being photographed in real time, but the escape vessel, for instance, looked like a tiny little model that was being held by hand. They were using lens flare to disguise that Ed Wood kind of shaky spaceship effect, the likes of which you would see in Plan 9 from Outer Space. So that didn't really work in Alien alone. But here they went with digital effects for outer space, but also the human craft. I liked the design. I thought it was pretty good. There was a good mixture of the rugged industrial sort of look, but also keeping it in darkness with lots of different lights to sort of light it up, like a malfunctioning Christmas tree. On the inside, or the belly of the craft, it was sort of like a bailing whale trailing behind a comet and gathering its resources. That's kind of a cool idea. It sort of reminded me of the craft in Alien Covenant, where it's almost anachronistic or symbolic in nature in Alien Covenant with the solar sails. Or not even the solar sails so much, but the way that they treated them as a shipwreck or a storm that knocked that particular ship out of commission. Whereas here, it's just how the ship operates while it's flying behind a comet, and I'm not sure how technically feasible that is, but it didn't feel quite as symbolic. And the visuals seemed up to snuff for what they were. If I had to compare it to anything, I would compare it to Pitch Black by David Twohy. The visual effects were of that kind of quality, I think. And that's not bad for a professional film that debuted in 1999, I believe, to achieve similar digital effects in a short film in 2019, so 20 years later. It's not bad. It looked pretty good, and it looked a lot better than Alien alone, I think. And I don't mean to bash on Alien Alone. I think that Alien Alone had good music, really good music. And there was the spacesuit, the Mobius design that you saw being worn by Dallas, Lambert, and Kane. I thought that the survivor in Alien Alone had a pretty good suit. But the sets felt a little bit marshmallowy or cobbled together in a way that looked a bit more jury-rigged than they should. The lack of budget in that film, I realized they had limitations, but they were pretty ambitious, and so their reach exceeded their grasp. Whereas here, the effects that they used worked for what they wanted to convey on the outside, but also on the inside. I thought the sets, for the most part, looked pretty good. I thought everything looked a little bit black. That there was a distinct lack of white. It seemed as though the sets themselves in Alien Harvest were pretty solid looking for the most part, but they had sort of a single texture. And again, they used sort of a prop bashing technique for the tunnel that they walked through. And I don't feel as though Ron Cobb and company really used prop bashing or kit bashing in the original film quite so much. Yeah, everything is sort of thrown together, but it had an industrial or an engineered quality to it. It was really solid. Whereas kit bashing or prop bashing tends to look a little bit too jury rigged, and then they sort of painted everything black, and I thought that kind of thing works better on a smaller prop scale as opposed to a larger scale. So there's that. But all in all, the costume effects here were really solid. The set worked well in terms of what it was. It was impressive enough that the characters could walk through it, and it was really well lit. You had slow takes with minimal cuts, sort of an A and B camera that they jumped back and forth between. I really enjoyed that. And as far as all of that goes, it works. The actors were able to move around inside the set in real time with the lighting, and the lighting was very dramatic in terms of the strobe lights operating as they walked through. Some of the other shorts, including Alien Alone, were a little bit minimalistic as far as the strobe lights go, and you really have to overwhelm the audience with that type of thing for it to work. I think you don't want to just have a tiny little flickering light that sort of registers faintly on their cheek or something like that. You want them to be surrounded by chaos, photological chaos and smoke, and it has to be real. You have to photograph it too, and they did that in Alien Harvest. It worked really well. The kill at the end was pretty satisfying. But also the egg, they had kind of an Aliens look to it when it opens up and you can see the slime. And it looked a little puffy, egg-wise, but the slime was nicely photographed, I think. And we had a face-hugging sequence where the face-hugger actually attaches to the guy's face in such a way that it made sense because he was immobilized. You know, he was out from his injuries or nearly out, and strapped to a chair. So if you have this kind of slow, flimsy kind of thing attached to his face, it still feels somewhat plausible because he's not going to be able to resist. He might be able to wiggle a little bit, but he's the perfect target. Also, the ending made me think a little bit for a second because I thought maybe she didn't have a fetus inside her. Maybe she was impregnated and she just didn't know it. You know, sort of a Twilight Zone sort of twist. And that wasn't the case. It turns out it was her hubby next to her, and you see him sort of off to the side, out of focus, him getting face-hugged. And then they show the woman with the xenomorph behind her, and then they show the egg, and then they jump to the woman getting impaled, then the egg opens up. It was a nice amount of pacing, you know, this, they go back to this, then they show this again. It was good editing. Yeah, so really nicely done. Alien Harvest is my second favorite of the shorts. If I had to think, music-wise, did anything grab me? I'm not 100% sure. It felt a little bit subtle, like Alien Ore, but there were moments that leapt out at me that I thought worked really well. In Alien alone, the music was phenomenal. It was great. But I also felt like they were using it to compensate for some of the visual snafus that they had. There were obvious limitations to what they were trying to convey. The music was there to sort of serve as a crutch. Here, they didn't necessarily have to rely on the music, but there were moments when the music was playing, I thought, where it worked for what it was at the very end when they're floating through space. And they don't show you the inside of the capsule, which is nice too. You get to imagine what's going on at that point. So that's good. The creature, the way they photographed it and all of that, it's just the best xenomorph of the bunch in terms of the adult xenomorph. And she's able to hack at it with the axe. That was another thing I wanted to comment on real quick, where her partner is slowly being pulled. So she picks up the axe and starts hacking at its arm. They didn't show it, so you can only hear it. So I like that to a certain extent. You can imagine something like that. It would be pretty hard to film, and you would have to destroy your prop or your costume to achieve that effect, probably. So they decided to go with sound effects and just let you imagine it. It felt believable because the two people were having a tug-of-war with this guy in the middle and the alien on the other side, and they're losing, so it's obviously stronger than them. So they have to use a force multiplier, the axe, to even the odds. And while she's hacking on it, they have these shots of the alien where it's sort of like turning its head. And while it's doing that, again, it's being photographed in real time with these quick sort of action frames. And all of its detail is being caught on camera. Just that strobe lighting is reflecting off of its costume and all of that detail, and it was really nicely done, because they had multiple frames of it just sort of reacting to being struck, and that was done really well too, I thought. Those are my thoughts on Alien Harvest, and to a lesser extent, Alien Alone. Perhaps I'll just make a list of the pros and cons for all of them. So if you want to find out more about what I thought about that particular short in detail, wait for that. I'll publish it on my blog. If you guys like this video, like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell to receive notifications. If you want to get a hold of me, follow me on Twitter. That's the best way to get a hold of me. Also, I have a Patreon, so if you want to support my content, you can do so through there. You'd be supporting these videos, but also the writing that I do on my blog. And until then, guys, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more content.